The writer Stefan Zweig once said it was impossible to tell where the city ended and the countryside began. As you look down this hillside, as the woods give way to vineyards which produce the famous Heuriger, you can see it merge into the edge of the city, and in the distance, the Pirata Park, the other great wooded area, great escape into the green for the Viennese. If you really want to understand Schoenberg and his music, then you probably need to come out to the Pirata Park and think about the Viennese taste for simply enjoying themselves. Because this culture is not really that serious. The Viennese were much happier going to balls, Jesus, enjoying themselves on a Sunday evening, going to the operetta, than they were taking life too seriously. It's worth remembering that all the serious stuff needs putting in some kind of context, which is this: pleasure, enjoyment, amusement. This giant Ferris wheel was built in 1897, which is the same year that Mahler arrived in Vienna to become music director of the opera. It's the same year that Brahms died. It's the same year that the popular mayor Karl Lueger took over in Vienna. It's a wonderful symbol of the new modern age that came to Vienna. But instead of being industrial, because Vienna was busy ignoring its industrialization, it has to do with this great pleasure park. So here we are in a great big Ferris wheel, and down below lots of fairground rides and all the things that you would expect to entertain people on a bank holiday or a weekend.
I think you have to understand Vienna is, as I say, you have the center where everything happens, and then you have these wonderful parks in Vienna, and that's a painting of the Prater. And that's also so wonderful at Vienna, that it's actually a small city, very green, surrounded by wonderful areas. So you are immediately in the woods or in the Prater, and that was open to the public.
Am I also right in thinking that it suggests a wonderful balance of different people within society too? I mean, the lady on the right seems very elegant, yes, but there's children playing in the pond.
That's true, very simple children, but I mean, this was a private garden for, so the Prater was always private, and it was always only open to the public in the at the end of the 19th century. And so that's new, but it still was used. It's with the elegant lady, with the nurse,
yes,
and again. On the other hand, you have the
yes,
simple,
yes,
because now they are allowed to go to the
yes,
Prater as well.
But in fact, in reality,
that's how it was.
But wasn't there at the end of the 19th century increasingly a popular movement in politics to reclaim some of the power, I suppose? This suggests that life was peaceful, that there wasn't any political tension.
Yeah, of course, there were a lot of political tensions, but in Vienna you didn't feel it so much. More maybe some in the intellectual, yes, groups you felt, yes, it. Of course, life became more and more complicated, because a lot of people, as I explained, came from the different parts of the monarchy, and it was not always easy to find a job. But the really revolution took place in the different Kronländer, as with the crown lands.
Yes, yes. The Schloss Belvedere behind me is a great example of old Vienna. It's a Baroque palace built in the early 18th century. The architecture is mirrored in the very formal gardens that run all the way down the hill into Vienna, and another matching palace at the bottom of the hill. The gardens are all straight lines, box hedges, formal fountains and statues. A great image of Vienna's sense of order, classical control. Even the Ringstrasse, when they built it in the 1860s, was more about control and order. The emperor was so worried about political uprisings that he thought a much wider street would let the army in quicker in case of riot. The Ringstrasse pretty much defines modern Vienna. It was started in the 1860s by clearing out what were the old city defences and opening up this very wide boulevard of a road. The opposition of the younger generation was that these buildings were all built in a historicist style. They didn't reflect the modern times at all. They were drawn from Greek classical architecture, from Renaissance and Baroque architecture. In other words, they pretended to be something they weren't. At the same time as this ancient, heavy, monumental style of the imperial architecture, you have within a stone's throw the beginnings of New Vienna. Just round the Michaelerplatz, you have one of the most controversial buildings of New Vienna. This green building behind me was designed by the architect Adolf Loos, was hugely controversial in its day. Built in 1910, caused controversy because it stripped back all of the detail and all of the ornament of the old style. The emperor called it the house without eyebrows because it doesn't have the decorative features above the windows. It doesn't look so controversial, but the contrast between that and the older style of buildings next to it caused something of a furore. A few years earlier, Loos had written a pamphlet entitled Ornament as Crime, in which he set out the theory that a culture which over-decorated everything and made everything more elaborate than it needed to be was a rather unhealthy, sick culture. What he thought the modern should represent is something stripped back and functional. Things should be what they are and not pretend to be something different.